Barry, OR Tambo International is the biggest and the busiest airport in Africa. Are authorities putting enough measures adequately in place, do you believe?
Yeah, quite right. The big question the public is asking, and I think the answer to that is yes. We've been hearing from Port Health Service authorities here today. It's not only about the thermal imaging scanning. There are about 3 levels of checks that passengers are going through before they enter the public side where we are at the moment. It starts off on the plane with a questionnaire. Now, this is about where you have come from, where you are going to, if you've had any contact with any people, and what symptoms you might be presenting with. This includes a runny nose, whether you've got a fever, whether you've got a cough, and what this is used at. And the public, having heard about this, they've actually scoffed at this questionnaire about what health this might be. What I'm told is that this is not just about identifying somebody who's presenting with symptoms, but if they are not presenting with symptoms, Michael, but they do at a later stage, the authorities would be able to use that questionnaire to establish who this particular individual has been in contact with, which flight they came from, and so on. So there's that element as a first step. As the passengers disembark the aircraft, they are then have their temperatures tested with a handheld temperature measure thermometer. At immigration, there is then the 3rd level, and this is what we saw earlier with those thermal imaging scanners, which are put on people or screen people at about a meter distance, and they're able to establish whether someone is presenting with a higher temperature. So it's those levels that they might be able to identify somebody and take them for further tests if need be. This is not just being done in South Africa, this is being done globally. And I can tell you it was first introduced as a mechanism, Michael, in the 2002-2003 SARS outbreak, which was first introduced as a screening mechanism in China and in Singapore. So it is an international standard, and I just want to add as well, it's not just being done now at our airports because of this outbreak, but it is something that is done all the time. It's just now there is heightened screening and vigilance and focus on particular flights, those coming in from Southeast Asia.
Well, Barry, we are, of course, part of a global world, a global economy. Should the public be concerned?
I think the public has to be aware and they have to be knowledgeable about this particular virus that is the outbreak. But I don't think that anybody has to be overly worried at this stage. And to put it into context, you just got to look at the numbers. And I was speaking to the Director General of Health earlier, and he was explaining how the latest figures we have is about 13,000 infections globally, the majority of which are in China, in the Hubei province in particular. We've got about 300 people who have died as a result of the infection so far. Those are the registered cases. That puts it at a mortality rate, or a death rate, if you will, of about 2%. Now, your influenza virus, which South Africa experiences seasonally, and so does the globe, has a mortality rate of less than 1%. SARS, on the other hand, that 2002-2003 outbreak, the mortality rate there was 10%, and MERS even more serious at 30%. So with this particular outbreak at 2%, it is of course a concern because it is a novel coronavirus. The scientists have to establish how it functions and the biology of it. But at this stage, it doesn't appear that it is on the same degree as the previous outbreaks that we've had. So the mortality rate is quite low. But of course, take those precautions that we've heard from the health authorities if you're traveling, and you should be able to prevent yourself from picking up this particular virus.
Barry Bateman, live to us from OR Tambo International Airport. Thank you very much.